This is the Government Games and Grants Meet the Federal Games Guild. Thank you. You know what? Thank you. The rest of you are, he's my favorite. Or it's an informal federal community of practice on interactive technology and new media and other stuff. This is a very small subset of what the Federal Games Guild is writ large. These fine people will tell you more and more about it as we move on. And the Federal Games Guild, it consists of, but is not limited to, this grouping of federal agencies and federal trust mentalities and living memorials to former presidents and the like. The most important part of this panel is to understand both the fact that the federal government is spending your tax dollars on game development actively, and that there are individuals working in said federal government who are enthusiasts and working to bring games more holistically into the work that they do at their individual agencies. We're going to introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about the work that we've done. I'm a reformed federal game guilder. My name is Alan Brooks. I used to be the producer at Arts Edge at the Kennedy Center. While there, I produced all the media for the education division. So the Kennedy Center does a lot of arts education media production, primarily through a website called Arts Edge, which I just learned yesterday is now being rebranded into something wholly different. But for now, you can get the games that I developed there at this link. We did a Romeo and Juliet Larp for teaching high schoolers how to both absorb Shakespeare better, but also trick them into acting. My background is in theater performance, high school theater direction, and arts education, so that was easily developed there. The other thing we made is a role-playing game system, a tabletop system for teaching high school literature. So essentially stick any piece of literature into one end of this as the world book and get a tabletop game out of it on the other side as the outcome. And so kids were learning both game development basics and pen and paper game development as opposed to computer-based game development, and they were also learning the actual literature that they were supposed to be learning. It was pretty fun. I left the Kennedy Center to go found this company, Building Momentum, with some friends of mine. Building Momentum is a training organization. We teach 3D printing, laser cutting, welding, Arduino, CAD, robotics, electronics, drones, counter drones, GPS, and other stuff. Out of a facility called The Garden in Alexandria, Virginia. It is an events venue. If you have a wedding coming up, shoot me an email. I'll give you the friends and family rate. And I will hand it off to my right. And so I'll be moderating and leading us through this. So.
And thank you so much, Alan, for putting this panel together. My name is Liz Newberry, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit about what I do in the game space, as well as what the broader Federal Games Guild does. So if anyone has been to Federal Triangle, this is our building. We're the Wilson Center. We're one of the living memorials, one of 2 living memorials in DC to a dead president. Kennedy's the other one. And we're also Congress's think tank. So we're a federal instrumentality and a think tank that's really putting Wilson's memory to good use by focusing on international policy. There we go. And sorry, they're on 2 screens in front of me. For my role, I'm the director of what we call the Serious Games Initiative, which my colleagues tell me is probably the coolest title you'll get in the DC area. But not just playing games all day for my work. We'll go more into that later, but I got my PhD from Cornell University, and a lot of what I do is try to figure out how we can take research and put it into a fun and engaging, non-25-page policy paper format for the broader public. There's a couple different ways that I orient towards the game space. One of the biggest burdens of my position is we design and implement games. So for example, we have a game that's about the federal budget, which is only in DC. Would you go, gee, what would be a fun, exciting topic for a game? Let's do the federal budget. Everyone's going to love it. But turns out millions of people worldwide actually quite enjoy the federal budget when it's put into a game format. I've played it from here to China to Armenia. And our latest rendition of it is done with the Brookings Institute and also funding not from federal sources, but from foundation sources for the games, and our game developers first playable. The whole onus of this is that it's free to play online. You can go to fiscalship.org and spend 15 minutes learning just a little bit about federal budget policy. You get to design your own goals and overall come up with your policy plan. It scales in difficulty and that sort of thing, and I've seen people play it everywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to 3 hours on YouTube, which is a lot more time than I thought anyone would ever spend on a game that I designed. The other thing about this is, so we have the Fiscal Ship and Budget Hero as a part of our federal games legacy and federal budget, but we've also expanded this to other regions. So one of our games that's out is, I'm going to mangle the Portuguese, and for the translator, I'll say Cities in Play. But it was a game designed for the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And the idea that we wanted to challenge kids to do is play as mayor for a day. And it has won tons of awards. It's been implemented across the city of Sao Paulo as sort of a textbook for gameplay. And the idea of challenging kids to play as mayor, we found that they're much more engaged afterwards in policy issues. They want to learn more about policy. And the onus of these digital games is really trying to lower that barrier of entry to make games more exciting and engaging, and really figure out how we can best make people excited about public policy. The other thing that I do is sort of behind the scenes work in developing prototypes. Well, behind the scenes more or less, because one of these is actually you can get on Game Crafter. I put together prototypes for working groups. So for example, I went with one of my colleagues in our China Environment Forum to Kunming, China, to put on a policy live action role play, not nearly as good as Romeo and Juliet. But in any case, I put together a workshop, and it was a live action role play where we challenged people to play as different stakeholders, and it was really a fun experience, but it was definitely prototype. The other prototype that we've developed with NOAA grant funding is Cards Against Calamity, which is a coastal resilience game where people play as different stakeholders in a coastal community. And that you can find on Game Crafter. The other ways that I support the game in the game ecosystem is that speaking engagements like this, is that putting on convenings at the Wilson Center. The Wilson Center is a space where we bring policymakers and decision leaders together with the leading minds in the space, and that is no exception to games. For anyone in the DC area who has a free morning on January 9th, I would definitely encourage you to come to the Wilson Center for our expo on esports and education. That I'll be leading. It turns out when you write your dissertation on esports, you can't really escape it ever. So I am putting on a panel about esports and education and the economics of esports that day. The other way I support games is through the Federal Games Guild. Along with Lakita, I'm a co-chair for that particular informal working group. We have a website. We're not a secret society. You can find us on the internet. It's wilsoncenter.org/Federal Games Guild. And really, one of the reasons why you might navigate to that website is because we have a small PDF of federal grant funding that's freely available. Needs to be updated because we have these things called dates that have now been produced for federal grants, but it's freely available. A couple of different ways that FGG orients to the game space is through different sorts of activities. Not every Federal Games Guild member does what I do. It depends on their mission goals, it depends on what their role is and how they've managed to convince their higher ups that games are good and games can be used for multiple purposes. So some people fund games, looking at Lakita's, and we have sort of a diverse representation here. Some people use games for outreach and education, so part of their mission goals might be already to educate the public, and they use games as one of those formats, and that's what we'll be hearing more about here also. And then some people, like me, are kind of the odd duck in the group where we do research in-house on games and game motivation and impact. And part of that is to show, again, reinforce that games can be used for a good purpose, that games can be used to help the American people and the broader public. I also wanted a fun chance to showcase some of the games that have been produced. Not that everyone does produce. It's actually a small minority of Federal Games Guild members who produce games. But we do have, like the Smithsonian Science Education Center. They're giving a panel on Saturday, and I put the information there, but it's at 10:30 a.m. They've got fun science games for very young ages. Tammy's Tower is one, and Pick Your Plate is a new game that they produced. And Tammy's Tower, you learn about basic concepts of physics. You play as a little tamarin monkey, and you go up and you build a little tower, and then a panda comes by and wrecks your tower. No, I'm kidding, but they move the tower, so you learn basic physics. And then Pick Your Plate, also available for free to play online, is actually, I think Pick Your Plate is downloadable, but that's showing you different plates, as it suggests, different nutrition, different ways to get nutrition from around the world. And then for any space fans in the room, our Smithsonian Science Education Center, not Science Education Center, but Interactive, has Supernova. It's a multiple medium experience. You can either read about it, you can play through a small interactive online, or you can also play as a VR experience. And then I also have to shamelessly plug Walden, a game which was created by Tracy Fullerton, but also supported by multiple federal entities. It's a game where you play through the book Walden, and it's a free, open space and beautiful game to play. She challenges a lot of the core concepts of games where they have to be high-paced, very competitive, super Michael Bay blowing up stuff, which I love those games.
Well, the part when the pond explodes.
Yeah.
Is really spectacular.
Yeah, the pond explodes at some point. But no, it's supposed to be a contemplative, meditative experience. So you can play that. I think it's a small download. And those are just some of the games that we have out. And I'm happy to, if there's a topic that you're interested in, happy to talk about it further later. And we probably have a game for you or know where to find them, I guess. Whoop. But for those especially in the DC area or from government agencies, I wanted to highlight that upcoming events. So we have this next upcoming week, January 9th through 10th at the Kennedy Center. The Department of Education is putting on the Education Games Expo. And this is a huge event where they take over the Kennedy Center, cram it full of wonderful games, and you get to see all sorts of game-based learning experiences, and kids are more than welcome to come.
There are 3 off-site events that week as part of the Federal Games Expo. Ed Metz from the Department of Education is not with us today because he decided to go to Italy. But he's coming back next week. It's the Kennedy Center, Wilson Center is doing one.
You're putting on one about maker spaces.
We're doing a maker
I'm
event.
putting one on esports. There's a couple of
There's a VR one.
There's a VR one put on by NSF, and then there's 2 or 3 that are actually at the Kennedy Center itself that are focused drills on like special education and that sort of thing. So if you're interested in those, please talk to us afterwards.
Yeah,
happy to tell.
They're free.
We also meet up. You'll see us in the wild at various conferences. South by Southwest, EDU, Games for Change, Serious Play. We do eventually leave our cubicles and are allowed to interact with the wider world occasionally. So you'll see us there. Also, the August 1st through 2nd, we'll have the Smithsonian Arts SAM Arcade, which MAGFest has in the past also supported and worked with. And that they take over the portrait, it's beautiful. They take over the portrait gallery and they fill it with arcade games. And that's that's a broad overview of some of FGG's stuff. And now I'll pass the mic over to Jackie.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi, my name is Jackie Gardy. I work at the Department of State, and I'm in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and I'm in the Office of English Language Programs. So I'm a former educator. I was an ESOL teacher here, really close by in Temple Hills, and then I took it was like a Fulbright, but just for English language teachers, and I went overseas and I taught for a year in Serbia, and then I came back and decided I wanted to work at the State Department because of my experience in Serbia. So there was an opening in English language programs, and I applied, and during my interview, the two people that were interviewing me, they started asking me about my game experience, like, did I play games? And I thought, this has got to be a trick question. Like, I'm at the State Department, why are you asking me this? But I was like, okay, I could either lie and say I've never heard of a video game, or I could tell them, sure. So I decided to tell them, yeah, I've played video games before, and they're like, perfect, because we're looking for a project manager for a game, and that's really what we need in our office right now. And I was like, okay, great. I think I'm in the right place. So today I'm here to tell you a little bit about 3 projects that we're either working on or have already worked on, and one of them is that game. So first off, I want to tell you about our comic book that's coming up for English language teachers. So these are teachers overseas that we create materials for in all things about English language teaching. And we've got a full spectrum of different programs for English language teachers overseas, including webinars, online courses, MOOCs, materials, large Facebook pages, and sub-Facebook groups. And then we created a video game in 2012, and we're in the process of creating a teacher training card deck game. Our audience is all overseas, so we oversee 26 posts overseas, and the regional English language officers are the ones that oversee it. So if you've heard of diplomats, like people overseas, these are specialist diplomats that oversee English language programming all over the world. So why is English language programming important, and why are we paying for it? Well, English language is the language of opportunity, it's the language of movement and advancement, and we also try to promote mutual understanding. And teaching English, well, supporting teachers of English, supporting English language learners is a big thing of what we do as our mission in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So the regional English language officers, they are specialists who design and manage programs to promote language learning and support teachers of English. They also conduct needs assessment and provide guidance to embassies and host officials on English as a foreign language, and oversee English language specialists and fellows. So I was one of those fellows that taught abroad, and it was all through a grant fund. And if any of you are interested in anything like that, you can always talk to me. I'm happy to talk about my experience and how you do it and how you can apply. And also through the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, we run American Spaces. American Spaces are sort of like libraries. Sometimes they're maker spaces. Sometimes they are little rooms. Sometimes they're big spaces that are off embassies. Usually they're not inside embassies because the embassies are quite difficult to get into, so these are public facing. So for an example, there's one in Jakarta, Indonesia that's in a mall, and it reaches the public in Jakarta, Indonesia. And I got to go there and present at this big venue that was like neon, and it was really cool, and they had video game space, they had a maker space, they had classroom spaces, all in this mall. So that was kind of neat. And as you can see from this map, there's a lot of them. They're all over the place. And some of them I've been to are like really small little bookshelves, like of just a few books of American culture and American like history and English language learning materials. So for the first project I want to tell you about, this came up because I was with one of my consultants in Chicago, and we went to Graham Cracker's comic books, and this was on the way to a work meeting, and he said, you know, I've always wanted to make a comic book, and I said, yeah, me too, comics are great. So we decided that we wanted to make a comic book for English language teachers to learn how to use comics for the classroom. So after workshopping our ideas a little bit, we decided, like, I went up through the approvals of funding in my office and got the approvals, and then we found an illustrator to start sketching it out. And we got invited to go to Comic-Con this year to talk about this in conjunction with other embassies that are doing comic book projects. So we worked with an embassy in Peru and an embassy in Mexico, and we were all present at this panel, and it was a really awesome experience. So the comic book, it's coming out very soon. It looks like this. And this, what you see here on the slide is a timeline of comics from the beginning of time to now. And it kind of shapes the history of comics and why comics are important as visual literacy. And the whole book is kind of telling you about the hows and whys of comics and why they're important for understanding and can also help with English language learning. So it's kind of a cool spin on it, and we are, this is coming out really soon. It's going to be available online, and it's going to be available in print form overseas. And then we're also doing a virtual exchange in conjunction with the comic book. So we're going to be connecting classrooms from the United States to classrooms overseas, all using this book as the foundation of like getting students to create their own stories using comics. So it's really fun. And the big message for this comic is no matter how much or how little money, talent, or technology you have, there are lots of ways to make comics. So you can share your story in lots of different ways using comics as a medium. Now, in 2012, we created a video game called Trace Effects, which was an online and DVD video game that was about American culture and language through interactive 3D immersive gaming. There's 7 chapters where the main character, Trace, he goes across the United States in 7 places, and he has all these different characters that collaborate to solve problems throughout the game. There's online and mobile language game, like sub-games for this, and then there was a really large teacher training manual that we kind of spelled out exactly how to use this game in the classroom. And this came in really handy for the teachers. The students were pretty, like all over the world, the students were able to pick up the game right away. The teachers, it was a little bit more of a push, so we had to have a lot of like supplementary materials because this was a new thing for most teachers overseas. Especially the countries that we work in. So, and then there's a certificate for each chapter. And then as soon as a student finishes a chapter, they get access to a comic book that's about that chapter. So this is what the portal looked like. Nope. Yeah, yep. That's what the portal looked like. And then here's some screenshots of the game. So the themes in the game were community activism, empowering women, environmental conservation, science and innovation, entrepreneurship, and mutual understanding. And it was a tool for our young learners to practice American English and learn about society, study, and travel in the United States. So they could get kind of immersed in this game and kind of explore in this world, this online world, what different places in the United States look like. And there's a screenshot of the comics. They're actually really well done. I thought they were really pretty, and we're probably going to pull those back out for this new project that we're working on so that we can use them again. And this is what the supplemental games look like that were inside the game shell. So I'm talking about all that kind of in past tense. We still have the DVDs, but because it was based on Unity and the grant ran out, this is before we realized that all the things would change with subscription-based access. The game is no longer accessible online because the drivers aren't working or something. There's a problem with it. So it's been taken offline indefinitely, but we do have copies of it on DVD, and we can distribute it by USB as well. And do I have time for the last one or not?
I think so.
I'm talking. Okay. So our last project that we're working on right now is critical creativity cards. This is my first foray into game making, and I didn't know what it was going to be like until we started. So originally we were going to adapt a book called Intention, Critical Creativity in the Classroom for our overseas audience, but then we realized that actually we'd really rather make this into like a card deck that can be used for teachers to promote critical thinking and critical creativity in the classroom. So critical creativity is when learners are using creative expression to demonstrate deeper thinking and the nuances of understanding content. This is important because look at the jobs of tomorrow. Look at the jobs that are happening right now. Creativity is an essential part of it, even if it's not artistic creativity. It's just having that creative mindset. So overseas, we want to make sure that our young learners are also gaining the skills of this creativity that's going to be required in the jobs of tomorrow. And the cards that we're making are domain and age agnostic, so we're trying to make sure that all the things that in this card deck can be used for all ages. We tested it in the field in 14 locations, and then we reiterated it because some of the things that we tested out just didn't work. So the original book is written for a United States teacher audience, and while there's a lot of great ideas, some of the content just kind of went over our audience's head. So we came back, we used the design thinking process to reiterate and rethink what we were doing, and we kept testing and testing and testing until we got a product that we really thought was good. And it's adaptable and remixable and accessible. And one thing I should say is that all the materials that I create in my office and that I edit, they're all open educational resources. So that means that they can be remixed, revised, reused, repurposed in any way. And this is a big movement that we started in the office because it wasn't aligning with what was going on. So if you're a taxpayer and you're paying your taxes, you should have access to materials that the US government is creating. And this wasn't actually happening because all the files were locked in ways that you couldn't actually remix or revise or even take and use for yourself. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is make sure everything is accessible. And this is what the prototype of the cards look like so far. So there's an activity. On one side, it tells what the students are going to be doing, and on the other side, there's the questions that the teacher asks the student while they're doing the activity. So it looks kind of simple, but we wanted it to be simple so that it would be easy to use and easy to remix for any teaching environment. And this is where we piloted all of our original cards, and where we're still working with the audience to make sure that the cards are going to be something that's going to be able to be used worldwide. So, and that's all I got, but I'm happy to answer any questions and happy to talk to you a little bit more about what we do at the State Department, especially in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs.
Great. Last but certainly not least.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Lakita Edwards. I'm an arts education program specialist at the National Endowment for the Arts. We're an independent federal grant-making agency. Our mission is to really support all communities, to have the opportunity to expand their creative capacities through the arts. So, and that primarily happens through our grant making focused on arts projects as well as national initiatives. And I'd just be curious if anyone in the room has worked on an NEA funded projects. Show of hands. No, not yet.
Some of us have tried.
Okay. So happy to share more about who we are. And as we're entering the 2020s, I'd like to present something from an earlier time, and that is a word cloud. You guys remember word clouds, right? Yeah. So this is my time capsule moment. If you'll notice on this slide, these are actual words taken from our guidelines, our grant guidelines. Now you'll notice that there are words, such as evaluation, projects, significance, professionals. These are words that you would expect to see if you're applying for a government grant. But then there are also words, such as artistic, inspiration, fresh, catalytic. These are words that you may not typically associate with applying for a government funding. And the National Endowment for the Arts really became really visible in the game space around 2012, where we really started just being transparent that, yes, video games, certainly an art form that is supported in our grant making. As this crowd knows, right, you have a video game, which means you're supporting artists, musicians, choreographers, writers, and storytellers. And from our approach as a grant maker, we're really interested in seeing how the arts can really support the solutions around really complex problems and issues. So coming from the education side, which is my division within the NEA, we're really focused on how the arts can really support students not only in gaining artistic skills, but also just really providing them with some, powerful pathways in the classroom and beyond. And actually on this slide is a research slide that signals to our NEA research that underserved students who have really quality experiences in the arts tend to demonstrate higher levels of civic engagement than their peers who do not. They also tend to demonstrate a deeper proficiency with problem solving and creative thinking. So all of these things that were called, 21st century skills, students who are involved in the arts really demonstrate that, and not just simple arts exposure projects, but deep learning through the arts. And a key research report is from James Catterall. I recommend everyone taking a look at that. It's called The Arts and Achievement in At-Risk Youth, Finding from 4 Longitudinal Studies. And you can find more of our NEA-sponsored research online, actually. So another connection to what gets people really excited is when you talk in really big numbers. So I'm going to channel Carl Sagan a little bit and say billions and billions, right? The arts matter in that regard. This slide was actually part of a collaboration with the NEA and the BEA, Alphabet Soup, Bureau of Economic Analysis from a couple of years ago that demonstrated the arts contribute to over $700 billion to our country's GDP. So as an agency, we're really focused on supporting the arts, not because it's a nice thing to do, but it's really a national priority. So when we support projects, with games, we're also acknowledging the contributions of artists alongside technologists in that work. So I'm going to talk a little bit in concrete terms, just to give an example of a project that was funded in the Arts Education Division. This is from Writers in the Schools, Houston. There are several Writers in the Schools organizations around the country. But Writers in the Schools applied to the NEA for Creativity Connects grant. And essentially, they were able to take their year-long creative writing residencies for students in the middle school space and focus on principles of game design. So students were able to take their creative stories about their lives and work collaboratively to come up with games around that. An example of a game that was created out of this program included a game called On Your Back. And it was about a young student's challenges of dealing with his scoliosis. So different levels of the game allowed you to go through different medical appointments and different interactions in the medical space. And another interesting thing about this particular collaboration is that the staff of Writers in the School Houston, they noticed that their students actually became better writers. So, they noticed right away that through the iteration of students working together and collaborating on these games, that transferred to their writing skills. And I'm sure the students were really happy to tell their parents that. And another thing that's really great to share about this program is that it was really a collaborative project. Writers in the Schools, I mean, they're an arts nonprofit, but they were also partnering with Eli Media. They also partnered with their local arts organization, the Houston Arts Alliance, to get this project funded and on the ground and to do the outreach. And I'm going to take this slide to do a plug, if I can, as a grant maker. Now, we fund arts education projects in and out of school. But one thing that we don't see enough of in what we call the media arts education space are projects that are really focused on educators in the game space. So we do support professional development grants in media arts education. And so, just thinking about those opportunities for educators, whether they're classroom educators, professionals who will eventually work with the pre-K-12 population, just providing that space for educators to play and then take those skills to the classroom, we would support something like that. So on this slide, we actually have just what are those elements that we're looking for in our professional development grants. So, who can apply to the National Endowment for the Arts? Typically, it's nonprofit organizations, 501c3s. These can include school districts, universities, also federally recognized tribes, and also, units of local government or municipalities. Now, I know some of you may be saying, well, I don't fit that. And to that, I will say, think of our funding stream as, from a multiplayer mindset. Chances are, if you're an individual artist, you know a local library, right, who could use your skills. Perhaps you are already partnering with a local theater to do some really interesting things with digital arts. Perhaps you're already working with a Boys and Girls Club. So, really think about, collaborative work. And so while we may not fund an individual, we do support collaborative projects. And finally, because I'm at the National Endowment for the Arts, just want to end on a literary note. To embrace the A word, the arts, and I know that's definitely something that you all come to for MAGFest, and super excited to be here with you all. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So, my favorite audience member again. So this is us. You can connect with us through our emails. We're all over the place. There's a very handy link that will link you to the Google slide deck that you saw today. So if you want to go back to the information you saw, it's here. So I've got some questions. I hope you have some questions. We've got a mic here. Please feel free to pop up and interrupt me whenever you want, but I'm going to start. I'm going to do a quick demographic study of you all. So who works for the government? Who's a federal employee? Okay. Awesome. Thank you for your service. Who are game developers? Cool. There's a little crossover amongst you. That's cool. And are any educators or teachers, anybody like that in the room-ish? Awesome. Cool. I just wanted to get a sense of where you were all coming to for these folks' thoughts and input.
I'd like to know also for the people who didn't raise their hand,
what am you?
Are you enthusiasts?
Just a random sampling.
Citizens who want to know how we were wasting your money? Okay, so on that note, how are we spending your money? What are just as a really quick primer, what are federal agencies in terms of like the kind of writ large groupings that you do? Because we went back to, I can go back to our slide real quick. What makes an agency federal? Is it just the money? What do you think?
So there's this thing called Congress.
Yeah.
So I want to quickly use this as an opportunity to clarify. Everyone who's involved in FGG is a federal entity, not necessarily an agency.
Correct.
So for example, the Wilson Center and the Kennedy Center,
Federal trust mentalities.
we have this very elaborate categorization under the umbrella, but largely, I would say one of the things that unites FGG as a whole is that we're either a federal entity or instrumentality, or however you want to swing that stick, serving the American people and the American public through some of our mission goals.
I think that's probably solid. So then why games? I'll open it to all three of you. Apart from they're fun and engaging, because we all know they are, but like, why are games from the developer perspective, why are they the best medium to use? And then from a funding perspective, what do you get out of it from that?
So I'll take you on a little history tour really quickly of why FGG came to be. So one of the things that happened around a decade ago is a lot of federal entities got together, and federal staff, people much like yourselves, who are interested in seeing how we can make what we're doing more exciting and take advantage of digital interactive media. How can we reach our mission goals? And I use that word very vaguely because there is no unifying mission goal.
Yeah.
The Wilson Center is an international policy think tank. The NEA is not in the same category. But we're all together in believing that one of the things that we can do is we can really reach people through a fun, engaging, exciting medium. Around that same time, there was also a growing body of research that was showing that people can learn through games. People can be motivated to change certain behaviors through games. And one of the things that you may not know is that there's a lot of nerds in the federal government.
Really?
Yes, it's true. But in any case, who also had those same questions. So FGG came out of it's an informal community of practice, and it's largely a body that connects people who are interested in leveraging games, using these for public good or social good, promoting and helping with our mission goals, but largely from those different angles I talked about: education, outreach, research, or supporting the ecosystem through funding.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Did I answer your question?
I think so, yeah. And so I'm going to start this next bit, Jackie, with you, because it sounds like you and I had much different experiences working in the government. Mm-hmm. So when I had to spend 8.5 years fighting tooth and nail to convince my bosses to give me money to develop games, and you came into a job interview being like, oh, and by the way, make us games.
Yeah.
So have you found... What have you found about trying to develop funding for your projects? Because that game was handed to you and said, here, we've got this thing that we're working on, we need somebody to kind of shepherd it. But then you went back to them to your stakeholders internally and said, I want to do this. What was the convincing process like that, or the selling process internally for you to get federal dollars kind of assigned to game development?
Well, I don't really have an answer for that because that game, it seems like that game is a one and done situation.
Okay.
It was a one-time grant project that came down from higher places than me. And then once that grant was over, there's been no talk about starting another one.
But you're developing...
We're developing other tools, and the tools that we make, they're not games like what we just created, but the process is a lot based on needs assessment. So it's what the field is oversees, what the audience overseas is wanting and needing for their teaching and learning.
Okay.
And I do regular polls to see what would stick, and then we try out things to see if it sticks. I like to push the envelope quite a bit. I'm a little bit more innovative, I think, than is actually like accepting right now. So
Yeah.
I'm regularly pushing like what's possible, because a lot of teachers overseas just want your textbook with the core curriculum and this is what I need to do, page 2, page 3, page 4, read aloud, read this sentence. And I'm wanting to push that envelope just a little bit. But things like the little cards that we're making, like those are ways to just say, hey, just try this out, see how it goes. Instead of committing to, here, have a brand new curriculum shoved down you by the American government. So little baby steps is what I try. And that's how I do justify getting the funding set aside from our materials allocation.
I mean, it sounds not unlike being a producer in a traditional developer, where you're, assessing the wants of your audience, and then going to your, studio director to say, here's what people are saying that we want. That's interesting. Do you find, Elizabeth, the same when you're launching projects? And then, Lakita, after that, how do you evaluate those? What are some of the evaluation criteria that come to you when people say, we want money to make a game for a public good, for an arts outcome? How do you, as the studio head, make that decision?
So I literally have games in my title. So a lot of my purpose is around designing and making games. The launch factor is an interesting question, and it's largely motivated by what type of research we're doing at the Wilson Center and what I'm being tasked to communicate. So, for example, we have an upcoming project that's been partially supported by the National Geographic Society to tackle ocean plastics as a topic area. We also have a disinformation game that's coming up for a close. It's partially supported through a couple of different entities, but largely the task is to help communicate and help identify key points of research, translate that into a way that people want to actually engage with on a broader topic area. One of the difficulties I have, which is a little bit different, is when you talk to researchers, being a researcher myself, oftentimes we make things very complicated in research. If I'm trying to make that accessible in a 15-minute to 20-minute game, that's a completely different story. So a lot of my job is project management in part, but also translation, but kind of what you're saying with like meeting the audience needs. And really the question I always start with in any project is, what is the audience that we want to tackle? What is their current assumptions, or what is their current level of understanding, and what are the learning goals we want to accomplish within the game context? So it's very much a pedagogical approach when you're talking about the serious game space.
So Lakita, as a funder, let's say I've done all the work. So I've some very basic questions. First off, when do people want to apply this year in 2020? What are the deadlines?
Yes, great question. So deadlines for our grants for arts projects will be in February and in July. So
start writing really quickly.
Yeah. So, and just so you know, it's about a year-long process from when you apply to when you actually hear back. The nature of federal funding, right? It's not immediate, but so worth it when you get it. So, if you apply in February of 2020, that means your project won't start until January 1st, 2021.
And the same for July.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So then let's. So I'm a game artist. I've partnered with the local 501. I'm doing a library game for something. We've submitted our application. We're ready to wait our year. But what are the things that you're looking for from an evaluation perspective that I should be thinking about as we develop this piece of content, this piece of art? Because yours is so focused on creating artistic expressions as opposed to educational ones. What are the things you're looking for?
So the thing is, I'm not looking for it. So as a staff person at the NEA, I'm actually not the one you need to impress. What's really great is, so I have a feeling I just lost any chance of getting Baby Yoda merch, but that's okay. But what was really great about our process, grant process, is that we have citizen panels. So our panels are basically staffed by a group of volunteers, experts in the field, from across the country, representing expertise, balance in gender and ethnicity, and also, field perspective. And so they really serve as our frontline level of review. And as an applicant, it's really, the onus is on the applicant to really address our review criteria. And we only have 2 review criteria. That's artistic merit and artistic excellence. So, artistic merit can look at issues such as, if your project, part of your project is focused on reaching our underserved audiences, how effective is your approach in doing that? Artistic excellence, that's really the quality piece. Looking at the quality of your artists, the quality of your partnerships. If it's in education, which is my division, the quality of your approach to teaching and learning in the arts with games. So it's really looking at, what are we doing and are we hitting those targets in terms of artistic excellence and artistic merit? And does that translate well to a panel review? And I always say, if you have questions, call us. We are literally at the phone like it's a PBS telethon. We want to take your calls, which I think is a myth I want to put out there, that we don't answer the phone. We so answer the phone. We want to talk to you because we know there's a lot of time that applicants put into preparing these grants. So, we'd be happy to, just talk through questions you have. If you're like, I don't even know where to start, just call us.
And I think that's pretty much true for all of our colleagues that work in the grant component of it. They would say, please contact them if you have any questions. Also, pretty please read the call very carefully.
Yeah.
Most of the information you're looking for is publicly available, but if there's any questions, follow. And I would say some of the agencies you might want to look for are Department of Education, who we've maybe mentioned once or twice.
They fund through something called a SBIR grant, a Small Business Innovation Research Grant, is the Department of Education. It's a not dissimilar thing.
But some of the other agencies you might look at, it depends on what you're thinking to design or looking for fun tools to play with, is NIH, NSF.
National Institute of Health, National Science.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just trying to translate that.
It's a race. It's a race.
No,
Name all the acronyms.
I was jumping over you. I was just trying to translate the acronyms. Sorry.
No, it's okay. NIH.
National Institute of Health.
NSF.
National Science Foundation.
Particularly, I know they're doing a lot in the cancer research division. There's also libraries, LOC and IMLS, and a couple of those, but they're all available on the Federal Games Guild website.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions, we're happy to try to find a colleague that can answer them.
Well, is there any or a lot of collaboration across the FGG? Are you guys working together on projects, or are you just like sharing ideas, or what kind of?
Yeah, so a lot of it is knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is also building points of collaboration. I would say the Ed Games Expo is a good example of that. So we'll actually have public office hours from 9 to noon.
That's right.
On the 10th?
Friday
the 10th. Please no blizzard or anything like that. We've had very poor luck in the past couple of years, either a shutdown or a blizzard. So just crossing our fingers and toes. But we'll be there 9 to 10. You'll get to see a wide array of different agencies, and we're all coming together around that particular event. And
that's at the Kennedy Center on the 10th, right?
Yes, at the Kennedy Center on the 10th. But other ways we work together is either through either knowledge sharing or actually helping support each other's projects through either physically being there. Prototype testing is one way I've helped out a lot in the past, and we can always work across agency boundaries. It's one of the ways that we're really trying to build collaboration.
And show up on cool panels like this, going, hey, y'all want to go to MAGFest?
That you all can be on this year because there's no shutdown.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, does anybody have anything we have a couple minutes left. Sure, do you want to grab the? Great. have one more question for you at the end.
Hello. First of all, great presentation. It was really cool seeing this. I did not know about the Games Guild coming in, but I'm really glad I found out about it because I've actually thought that something like it should have existed for a while. So I work in Congress, and I kind of have a question generally about what congressional outreach is like for you guys, for the Guild, for the individual members. I've tried to explain things like the benefits of grant making for games development, or things like the esports economy for congressmen, congresswomen, and for congressional staff members, but those conversations never really get that far. So I'm curious to know if you guys, if that's like even a function of what the Guild does, or if you guys have a lot of success on that, or pointers.
Yeah, so do you want me to take the point on?
Yeah, you can start.
So I'm an odd duck in this, that the Wilson Center, part of our purpose is to communicate with Congress. So we host labs, we host a lot of public policy briefings, convenings, and that sort of thing. So we're definitely engaging with Congress. I've demoed games on the Hill. We've had launch parties on and off the Hill for Fiscal Ship. So really trying to communicate with Congress about what opportunities are out there is a core part of our mission. Building those bridges, as I described before. I would say for the broader FGG, because of where they sit, not necessarily as much direct engagement with Congress. And Nikita, is that a fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you know, at each of our individual agencies, we have congressional affairs staff, where that's their appropriate function. And as Liz mentioned earlier, the FGG is really just this informal community of practice. It's very active and engaged around games. So, yeah.
That being said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to help. And speaking of esports and the economy, there's a January 9th event in the morning. I'm kidding.
Yeah, make that plug.
Yeah, so also there's some folks who are already probably your colleagues on the Hill that we can connect you to that are the same kind of standard bearers that you are, right?
Yeah.
I would appreciate that.
I'm
Thanks.
sure he's probably even here this weekend. So, any other questions at all? We answered everything? Yes, sir.
How do you reach out to individuals for things? A lot of what I've seen involves an entity, an agency, an organization. If an individual wants to do something that's help in some way or produce something, what is the way you reach out or they can reach to you?
The website? Probably.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple of areas would be, you know, we are present in our own individual capacities at different conferences. I know a couple of us were at the American Library Association conference in DC. The resources we have, because we're federal, you know, they really are open resources. So if you ever come across either a federal program or toolkit, there will be information on, you know, contact who was behind that. So please do not hesitate to reach a federal agency directly. And, you know, we really do, especially on the grant making side, we really do want to make sure everyone is familiar with our funding, and also we do a lot of translation with our guidelines, particularly if you're looking at something you're like, I don't really see how I fit in this work. You can have that conversation with us as program officers, and we'd be happy to help you out on that.
Yeah, for me, I'm like directly approachable, and I go to a lot of domestic conferences, so I'm kind of on the circuit for ISTE. I go to International Society for Tech Education. I go to South by Southwest EDU. I'm going to EduCon a few weeks from now, and I usually try to do a few ed camps across the country as well. And for me, like, I don't do all this stuff by myself. I have a team of consultants that helps me with a lot of the work that I do. So I have like resumes on file, and if I have a certain project and I'm looking to staff it up, I look at my pile of resumes. So like, you can send me your information and you'll probably be on my desk for a while because it's government. But when a project comes up, like I'll remember, oh, there's that one person that was a specialist in this. So for my next project, I hired somebody that is a comic expert in education for history, American history. And I just happened to know him because I had already had his resume, and that's what we're doing with our virtual exchange project. So he's not actually an English language TESOL expert, but he's an educator that is involved in comics. So like kind of things like that. And if there's another game coming up, I might need help with somebody's expertise in a certain aspect of game design or gaming. So that's kind of what I do when I'm going to all the conferences. Is it's more like I do domestic outreach where I'm meeting people and hoping to work with them in the future.
Do anything? So last question, it's the same as your interview question. What games are you playing now? Are you guys gamers yourselves in your own lives? Are you playing anything? Board, dice, luck, cardboard, video?
Yeah, as much as the Wilson Center is known for our digital games, I'm a big board game geek. So
What are you playing?
right now, for the holiday, I got Wingspan. I'm very excited.
What is Wingspan?
So Wingspan is a citizen science game, or based on it. It's which
Wait,
is
this
the
is
other
not
thing
for
that
work?
Wilson Center does. I had to do it for research. No, but you are a birder basically, and you collect birds. It sounds like that's the worst explanation for it ever, but it's by the same game company that did Viticulture, I believe, and Scythe, thank you. And one of the things that I love about the functionality is I don't have to drag my poor husband to play with me every single time. They have a single player capacity.
Cool.
And it's actually very difficult. Oh, great. Stonemeyer.
No, the actual person who designed it.
Oh, nice.
Elizabeth Hargrave, she lives in College Park.
Oh, great. Yeah, great game. Love it.
Right now I'm playing Star Realms. Does anybody play Star Realms?
Star Realm? No.
It's pretty amazing. It's an app, but I think it's also a card deck, and I have the card deck, but I play it on the app. There's an arena, and you can play other people, and you build ships, and there's space worlds, and it's very cool, and I do it way too much.
So I found the latest game I'm playing at a grocery store. Does anyone have like an Aldi? Do you know
Yeah.
those chains of grocery
I
stores?
love Aldi.
So you know how they have just that random section of stuff?
Yeah.
So 4 weeks ago, I was at my Aldi, and I found those like Namco plug-and-play games, consoles. It was Ms. Pac-Man. So I have been playing that, yeah.
The difference is she has a bow in her head.
It's more than that. It's more than that.
Well, I got an Oculus Quest, and I've been playing a lot of VR, and it's been hurting my neck, but it has been stupidly fun. And I bought it because Valve hates me and makes me want to spend money and announced Half-Life in VR. So that's it. Thank you all. We'll be around for a few minutes. If you need anything from us, please feel free to.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.